So Dana White goes and slags off Showtime Steven Espinosa executive, right? Right after the Contender Series, which takes place on ESPN, where Dana White has these regional guys come in and try out for the UFC, and if any of them have any impressive fights, then they earn a contract. But nonetheless, weekly, this has become some sort of like highly anticipated podcast, and I'm talking about Dana White's press conferences, because he does more than just talk about the amazing fights and the crazy knockouts that happen in that particular show or the guys that he goes and signs. It becomes a lot more than that. It becomes this content to where you get the takes of Dana White and what he thinks about Exhibit A in combat sports, Exhibit B in influencer boxing. And one of the things that we took out of this was his entire glee and happiness to see the fall of Steven Espinosa in Showtime Boxing. And another thing to understand here is that it really shows the lack of touch within the Showtime executive company, and in particular PBC, because they just don't understand the modern promotion of things. They go out and slag off somebody like Eddie Hearn, who, by the way, has been very innovative in the way that he's put on, let's say, stadium fights with Anthony Joshua, with Carl Froch, and then went on to even sign Jake Paul to do an influencer boxing match that gave him the opportunity to box for his pro debut in Miami. And the PBC guys look down on this. They look down on every little thing that Eddie Hearn does. They look down on the fact that Eddie Hearn gave his guys very competitive matchups in the same way that, let's say, they give you competitive matchups in the UFC. There was no holding hands of any type. And by the way, crazy enough, Dana White is sponsoring or promoting this boxer named Callum Walsh, who is an Irish boxer that fights for the UFC Fight Pass network. So that's the connection in which Dana White is promoting this particular boxer. And Dana White mentions that he's giving this kid very tough fights along the way, and not giving him easy tune-up fights such as taking on journeymen with 100 losses. Not that there's anything wrong with these guys, but there is a place for them in the world of professional boxing. And yes, they do help out prospects that do need it a little bit. But for the guys that were in Eddie Hearn's stable, at some point he gave you a 50-50 fight. Just like with the likes of Lawrence Okoli when he took on Isaac Chamberlain. These are very important matchups to take a look at and understand, because guess what? This shows the ethos and the trajectory in which Matchroom wanted to take its course in professional boxing, which is what? Follow the model of the UFC. And what exactly is that? Give your guys tough matchups. Stop giving them easy matchups, tune-ups, just to try to somehow gain money with every little journeyman fights that they have. No, that's not what they were trying to do. Well, with PBC, you got to give them credit, because in the last few months, they've been really red-hot fire with the likes of events such as Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis being in their stable and them reaping the benefits of that particular event and the clout that they were able to get out of that, and also the other marquee matchups that they were able to make during this particular year. Now, the problem is, it's one of those things where the Johnny-come-lately type of scenarios, because whatever it is that they had made for this particular year seemed to have not been enough in the past previous years, where they really took no effort into trying to make competitive matchups, innovative matchups, such as maybe delve into influencer boxing the way Eddie Hearn did, but then went back to the professionalism of real boxing and real marquee matchups. And then, not to mention the fact that Anthony Joshua is one of those guys that right now is really having all the most realist matches that a heavyweight can possibly have in the heavyweight division right now, because everybody's talking about how Fury doesn't want to fight Usyk, and then Fury is fighting Francis Ngannou, and then Usyk supposedly got laid out, or no, was it a foul, or this controversy between that. So now there's this talk of, well, was he even the best heavyweight of all in the first place? And then they look at Fury, he's vulnerable. And then you look at Joe Joyce, he loses twice to Weili Zhang. I forget his first name because I'm thinking of the female Weili Zhang fighter in the UFC, but we're talking about Zhang, the heavyweight boxer, who, yes, defeated Joe Joyce for the second time. And Joe Joyce, guess what? He defeated Dubois. So you look at all this situation and who beats who. It's very similar to what you see in the middleweight division in the UFC, right? What do you see there? You see Pereira, who knocked out Izzy and then got knocked out by Izzy again, and Pereira knocked out Sean Strickland, only for Sean Strickland to beat the guy that knocked out Pereira, which goes to show you just how even that particular division can be. And then look at Pereira now. He's contesting for a 205 title in the upcoming pay-per-view with the John Jones Stipe Miocic card. Not the upcoming one. Obviously, there's 294, and then there's 295, and then there's 296 with Leon and Covington. But nonetheless, so with that in mind, what we have going on with professional boxing is a stalemate of thinking that you can promote fights in the same similar fashion as before. Meaning that, oh, we're going to conserve our guys, keep them undefeated. We're not going to give them all these 50-50 fights. But once again, I had mentioned with Sean Strickland and Johnny Eblen. Yes, Sean Strickland is the champion of the UFC, but Johnny Eblen is a undefeated 185 champion of Bellator. So whose is better? I argue that Sean Strickland, because guess what? He's fighting in a tougher league, and for him to take these losses, it's almost like kind of forgiven in a way, and then for him to go out and redeem himself only to be champion just legitimizes the reality of a sport that is a true hot potato in which the pound for pound doesn't belong to anybody, in the famous words of Leon Edwards. So that's what you have with the UFC. That's what you have with Matchroom Boxing, and in particular AJ, and also a lot of the matches and the risk-taking that Eddie Hearn was willing to do. He was willing to give Conor Benn against Chris Eubank. How amazing was that, right? The undefeated Conor Benn was going to be given to Chris Eubank, or maybe they saw something in the way that, let's say, Chris Eubank got knocked out by Liam in the first fight, only for him to come back and win the second time around by knockout also. Right? What is it? What was it that Conor Benn saw? Or is it that they wanted to take the risk and they knew that with that type of fight and that type of event that they didn't want to miss out on, they knew that, you know what, it was worth the risk no matter what. And sometimes that's just what you got to do, and sometimes that is what's best for business. With Showtime and PBC, on the other hand, they have a very old way of operating. And look where it got them. Now, they no longer have any stake to any company that wants to give them any TV time. And this is going to be the last time that Showtime is going to contract with them. So there's a lesson learned right there. In life and in business, you have to take risk. Because if you don't, then you're going to miss out on the greatness that you could have had. And by the way, think about all the greatness that was missed. Talk about Arthur Beterbiev. The guy is undefeated, 100% knockout ratio, but nobody barely even knows him. Right? He didn't have that same hype that Wilder had going into the Fury fight, the first one. And he didn't have any of these opponents that really are going to test him. Well, guess what? Maybe now he gets to fight Bivol, and we'll see if that somehow catapults him to the top, or maybe get a key matchup with the likes of Canelo or a big name, or just go out into the realm of irrelevancy, but with greatness in the same similar fashion as Joe Calzaghe. But what does that tell you? And really, what does that teach you is that you have to go out and promote your fights. But sometimes promoting your fights and promoting yourself is not enough. You got to go out and take the risk with the promotion and with the persona that you want to amplify to the world. But it's a very complicated business. And PBC found out the hard way in the modern digital space of this world that's ever evolving with technology and attention span. So I feel bad for them, but at the same time, hey, listen, it's the theater of the unknown, and Dana White, he may be slagging off an opposition, and it's just protocol to do that, but there's some truth to the laughter and the glee that he has against his enemies. Until then, enjoy the fights in all different networks and in all different platforms and apps.